Everybody. We are finally online. I wish that you are having a wonderful Sunday. And I also pray that this coming week will just be a blessing to all of you. I know it's difficult out there. Present world events have taken an unfortunate turn in what's happening in Afghanistan. And that's sending ripples, waves of disturbances, no, all over the world, and it's affecting so many people. So many people are afraid. So many people are facing uncertain times, and this placed on top of our global experience in this pandemic. It is ever changing. It is confusing. It is, to say the least, uncomfortable. It is difficult. In the midst of this mess, in the midst of this debacle, if I may, the question has always been, how are we going to cope? How are we going to survive? So this morning, I bring to you this message: God in the afterglow, making sense of the mess. This making sense of the mess is not that easy. It is not as simple as let's do this, let's do that. It's not as simple as or as setting up a set of steps and everything will be fine. It is difficult. In the nation of Israel, there was this instance during the time when they first took their very first steps out of Egypt. For 300 or so years, they have been enslaved as a nation in a land that was not their own. For more than 300 years, there was no freedom. They lived at the mercy of their captors. It was a mess. And we all know the story. God moved and God made a way so that this nation can get out of its imprisonment, of its slavery, to get to the plan of God, to get to the promise of God. And they got out of Egypt, and still it was very difficult. They were being chased by their captors, and now they were facing the Red Sea, something that they could not cross. But a miracle happened. The Red Sea parted, and they were able to cross over into dry ground, leaving their captors drowned in that sea. When they got to the other side, they celebrated. And they got to the other side, they thanked God. But somehow, they were impatient. They were asking, what now? So we're here, what now? Some of them were apprehensive. Some of them were actually angry at Moses, saying things like, was there a lack of graves in Egypt so that you needed to take us here so that we may be buried here? Things like this. They were grumbling. And so, being bored, they said, we need something to lead us, to bring us to that next step, to bring us forward. They got all the gold, they molded it into a golden calf while Moses was up in Sinai meeting with God. They set up the golden calf and set up a party, and they were reveling. And there are indications that the reveling turned into some immoral acts and all that. And while this was happening, Moses was coming down the mountain bringing the law of God. He got there, and to his dismay, he saw this: that a nation was trying to do its own way, to try to find its own way, to where it wanted to go, and that was forward. It didn't make sense to them that they were waiting there. It didn't make sense to them that they weren't moving. So they did it their own way. Ladies and gentlemen, when Moses came down, he was angry because the people of Israel, instead of thanking God, instead of celebrating the goodness of God, the love of God, His faithfulness, they had turned their allegiance and their heart to other things. So there was the displeasure of God, and judgment came down on them. The revelry, the party turned into a punishment. 3,000 people died, a plague came. And it was like there was no rest, there was no order, there was no stability in their situation. And in the midst of this mess, suddenly the Bible focuses on a conversation. Like the conversation of Moses and God, it zooms in and focuses on this man and how he survives, how he moves forward, how he copes, what does he do to be able to just cope. This conversation is between two friends. The conversation is between Moses and the God that he has followed. The camp, it said that during that time, nobody wore jewelry because everybody was mourning at the judgment, the displeasure of the Lord. Moses was indignant. He was asking, what got into you? Why did you do this? So Moses goes to the Lord, and God tells him, Moses, just get out of here. Take these people and just go to the land I am preparing for you. But get out of my sight. I'm not going with you. And Moses, being a human being, talking to a deity, and yet the relationship there was very clear. They were friends. He says, how can you leave us? You said we were your people. How can you tell us to go and not go with us? He said, you told me to go. And mind you, the way that Moses got into this mess, he was actually living a peaceful life. He was a shepherd working for his father-in-law in some very quiet, lost place in the wilderness, and he was taking care of sheep. The only problem was probably the wolves. The wolves or whatever predator was there. That was his only problem. But God called him out of that place to go and liberate Israel. And it wasn't easy. It was an uphill challenge all the way. He was dealing with Pharaoh. He was dealing with the stubbornness of Israel. And the whole struggle to get them out. Now that they're out, they reach a barrier, the Red Sea, that cannot be crossed. And if they did not cross, it was certain death. They finally got across because God moved. Now they're here. And the people of Israel, they worship another God instead of the faithful God that had saved them. And it's a mess. Here he is, he's angry, and he's also afraid. But at the same time, it's this friendship with this God that is the only hope for him. Most of us are thinking about Israel and all those people, but let's make it smaller. Let's make it smaller. Let's look at Moses today. How does he cope? How does a man cope in the midst of that mess? Let's settle this. It is a mess. He goes to God and says, how can you leave us? How can you let us go and go to a land and you're not there? He said, if you're not telling me who will go with me, I can't go, he says. You can't do this, he tells his friend. And God, God, he backs off and says, okay, okay, I'll have an angel go with you. My power will be there. My representative will be there. And it was like a compromise. They were haggling. They were moving back and forth, and so God backs off and says, "Okay, okay, I'll let my angel go with you." And you know what Moses says? It's so surprising. Moses says, "If you're not going with us, let's not start this caravan. If you're not going with us, let's not even start the journey. If you're not going with us, then let's not even go." And probably God was looking at the heart of this man, wondering, what does he want? What does he want? I'm giving them the land. What does he want? They don't have land. Now I'm giving him land, and he doesn't want the land. And now I give him a bodyguard, an angel, to assure their safety. But he still doesn't want the angel. He wants me to go. That's what the conversation looked like. By the way, if you want to look at it, it's in Exodus 33. That conversation there, please look at it. Exodus 33. And here they go. And then Moses says, if you're not going with us, let's not even go. And God says something very strange. He says, okay. He adjusts. Okay, okay. I'll go with you. Personally and nationally, it's a mess. Moses is left with this problem and is dealing with a God who wants to bring judgment. And he's telling him, will you forgive? Will you just... And God is giving inch by inch. Moses says, okay, I'll go with you. But Moses doesn't stop. It was like a home run already. Okay, I got God to do what I wanted him to do. And he should be happy with that. In Tagalog, pare, ayos na eh. No, he goes further. He goes further, pushes his luck. He presses and says, I want one thing more. I want one thing more, he says. Wait. He says, I want to see you. I want to see your glory. And it says, we're going to read this in Exodus 33, verse 18 and 19. This is what Moses says. Moses said, exactly, he said, please let me see your glory. After God adjusting and after all these negotiations, Moses presses and asks some more. Can I ask one more thing? Can I see your glory? And God said, I will make my goodness pass right in front of you. I see a man who is caught up in a mess, but I see a man who is wanting more than a solution to that mess. Suddenly, in this verse, you see what Moses really wants. You see the why of Moses. You see what makes this man follow God in a most difficult life, into difficult circumstances again and again. What makes a man follow God into trouble after trouble after trouble, into a great headache, leading a people who are not only struggling, they're also hard-headed. What makes a man leave his comfort to follow God in this life? And we find it here. It wasn't the land. It wasn't even the freedom. It wasn't even for the future. Because God had given it all. He had exercised His power so that Israel can have freedom. Now He exercises His patience, His love, His forgiveness, and forgives the nation. And now says, I'm still going to give you the land. And still Moses is not happy. Moses asks for one more thing. He says, I want to see your glory. And God says, I will make my goodness pass in front of you. I'll show you. How does a man cope in the mess? We are in a mess today. And our whole topic for this month is God loves this mess. Probably more appropriately, God loves you in this mess. We may see world events today just blowing up in front of us. We may see our plans go to smoke. We may see all our finding frustration after frustration. But yet, we look at the world and it's a mess. But in this mess, God is loving you because He's a very personal God. The provisions in your home, the strength, we are still at this moment here. How do you survive mentally? How do you survive emotionally, financially, and all this? We're still here. Why? Because I pray that you see that God is good. It's so important. How do we cope like this? We have all our problems, we have all our fears, but I pray just like Moses, we will focus on that one thing, and I hope you may find it in your heart to give God a chance to show you this in this mess. Why? Because He's loving us in this mess. Moses not being satisfied, oh okay, we have land. Oh okay, great, we have freedom. No, Moses pushes it. He says, I want one more thing. I want to see your glory. I know we have a lot of needs, but I pray that you see that the solution to our satisfaction will not be in the solution of our problems. Our satisfaction is when we start wanting to be satisfied by the best thing. This mess pushes Moses to look at himself and ask himself, what do I really want? And he said, more than anything, I want to see the God that permitted all of this. I want to see the God that allowed all this. And I want to find out this question, why? And Moses pressed, and he got his answer. He had this meeting with God. And in that meeting with God, he did not only see the power, he did not only see a display of fireworks. He did not only see a God who can give them anything. He saw a God that was so great that everything was in His control, and yet so small that this God considered Moses his friend, and Moses can talk to this God as his friend. It's necessary to see God as great, but I hope you will also see God as small enough to care for the details of your life, small enough to know and care about how you feel, small enough to sit down with you when everything is hopeless, small enough to 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 walk with you when you don't even know where you are going, to keep you company. When confusion, frustration, fear, and anger are just eating at your heart, there he was. God allows his goodness to pass in front of Moses. Why? If Moses did not ask, God would not have to do it, but Moses asked, I want to see your glory. I'll tell you a story. More than 20 years ago, I was caught in traffic on Rojas Boulevard, late afternoon. That the sun was really low on Manila Bay, and we all know that the sunsets of Manila Bay are legendary for its beauty, for the color. And I was there, I was caught in traffic. I was headed towards Manila, and I looked to my left, and there it was, the sunset. I could have looked past by it, and I've told this story to some of you already. I could have looked past it and just looked at the sunset and say, I could have just been angry at the traffic or their miserable whining in the traffic and not care about the sunset, but I stopped. I was in traffic and I looked, I said, it's beautiful. And a warmth started to come into my heart. I said, there's nothing I can do about the traffic. I'll probably just pull over. And I pulled over into this old restaurant, which most of you know, it's the Aristocrat. And I parked in the parking area, got out of my car, and looked at the sunset. I spent time there. Beautiful, the red, the orange. Beautiful, that yellow sun that was going down. The sea was right there. And I was really just, quieting myself because I could not do anything about the traffic. Might as well enjoy the sunset. And there, the sun had finally gone down. It had dipped. It had disappeared under the horizon. And as I was about to go into my car, I couldn't go. Why? Because when the sun went down, suddenly the sky was colored beautifully. The sun was hitting the clouds from below the horizon, and it was orange. There were the yellows. There were the beautiful whites of the clouds being being colored by those yellows, oranges, pinks. It was beautiful. And I couldn't leave. And suddenly, the Lord began to speak to my heart, and I started to realize how many people would stop to enjoy a sunset. And I realized that God paints it every day, and many of us do not even notice. I stopped to enjoy it. And now that it's gone, I couldn't leave. Why? Because after the sunset, there's still the afterglow. That's the afterglow. There's still the afterglow. It is less dramatic, but equally beautiful. The beauty was different. The sunset was magnificent. It was exploding in color. But this time, now that it had fallen, it colors the sky. It's more subdued, but no less beautiful. And yet I was still enjoying it there. And it was at that moment when I felt that I was glad that I stopped. And it was like you would feel that the Lord was thankful that you had enjoyed His painting. But how many of us will stay beyond the extravagant, beyond the magnificent, to taste the quiet beauty of a sun disappearing, to see its colors and eventually turn into gray and darkness? I had taken it all in. And in that moment, beyond the sunset and the colors, I started to ask, it's painted everything. Why do you make it beautiful every day? Why? What is your why, Lord? And I think it is for one reason and one reason alone. He loves us. In that traffic jam, in that mess, He was loving me without me knowing it. And it would really depend. I could enjoy the sunset, or I could stay a little longer and start enjoying Him. I drove away that night quiet, peaceful. I drove away that night feeling that I had understood a great thing. That behind every traffic jam, behind every sunset, behind the mess of life is a God that really does love us. And I was able to get through my traffic jam. I'm not trying to trivialize your suffering. You cannot compare a traffic jam to what's going on with us today. Your loss, the people that have died, the suffering, the appalling situations in our hospitals, the lack of everything to cope with this disease, this pandemic. I'm not trying to trivialize that. I'm not trying to compare it to a traffic jam, but I'm just saying is, in order for us to make sense of this mess, like what the Bible did, let's start focusing on our conversations with God. Because the Bible shows us that God showed His good. He made this, in some translations, He made all His goodness pass in front of Moses for him to see, appreciate, for him to behold. Why? Because Moses was asking why. And God showed him one simple thing. I'm loving you in the midst of this. I'm loving you through this. He found a personal God, a God who deals with his tiny problems, a God who's willing to listen even to his moaning, his whining. He found that. And you know what? After that, it wasn't an easy life. The problems were great. He went through 40 years of difficulty, 40 years of danger, 40 years of coping with the needs of 2 million people. But you know what? He completed his journey because he was able to make sense of all this. We want to complete our journey. And to complete our journey well, and part of our journey is going through our present difficulty. I just want to share with you probably 3 things very quickly. We look at Moses and God. How do we cope? How do we make sense of this mess? It is to see God in the afterglow. To see God after battles. To see God after every problem. To give our time to process with God. To give a space where we can consult, where we can whine, break down, where we can just be us and talk to our friend. First thing I see is this. Moses had an honest conversation with God. Beyond the temples, beyond the religiosity, by the way, their relationship was not based on religion, okay? The relationship was not based on rituals. There were no rituals here. The relationship was not based on procedure, based on a book. No, the relationship was based on their encounter with one another. When you are in problems, you do not need a ritual. You do not need, when you are in a mess, we do not have time for protocols. And the closest thing and the quickest thing is simply reaching out and having a conversation with God. Moses had an honest conversation with God. It was unfiltered. God saw the frustration of Moses. God saw the disagreement of Moses. God saw, and Moses was talking him with full emotions, no fear. Why? Because there was a relationship. There was no formality. It was raw. When we have our conversations with God, do not clothe it with fake words. Why? Because God is a God. We're trying to, how do I say this? We are trying to, we feel like we are trying to satisfy a difficult God. He is not a difficult God. He is a friend. The opening of Moses' statement with God was not opened with a hi, how are you today? No, when Moses goes into the presence of God, Moses says, why will you leave us? There was no formalities, there was urgency. It may be abrupt, it may look disrespectful, but the relationship, but within that relationship context, friend to friend, it is perfectly all right, and it is what is to be expected. In the midst of your loss, your fear, your frustration, this everything's not working, the government, the economy, our COVID. I heard about what's happening in Japan. We have a church there. There are 25,000 cases a day and rising. In the midst of all this distress, make sure to have a conversation with God. You can be angry all you want. I'll say this, it doesn't need to be a good conversation, but it has to be a real and true conversation. Bible tells us, those that will worship Him will worship in spirit and in truth. Truth has to be real. The words have to be real. The emotions have to be real. God can handle it. By the way Moses was talking to him, because of our religiosity, you'd expect that God would be angry and a lightning bolt would come down and hit him. No, it did not. It was fine because they were friends. It was fine because they were intimate. They were close. Have a conversation with God. Instead of talking to yourself, or probably, whatever if you do not know God as God and there's that universe that you talk about, go talk. Allow God to answer. Have a conversation, have an honest conversation with God. Secondly, what we see in that conversation is this: Moses would not be satisfied with what God would give. And I keep on saying this, God is not a mayor or a governor or a senator, congressman, a president, that when you go to Him, all you want is what He can give. You'll never get to know that public official. But with God, it's different. Yes, you have needs, but beyond your needs, don't be satisfied with just getting by. If you call your conversation with God prayer, don't be satisfied with the answer to your prayer. I pray that you will move forward, press on, and begin to find the God who answers prayer. And when you get there, you see His beauty, you see how profound that love is. You see how merciful and how great the mind, the plan, how generous, how benevolent that God is, and how caring and how loving. I'll tell you this: the answer to your prayer will become less important. Why? Because you would have seen the real solution to life, Him. To get to know His person. In all these characters that we have been talking about these past weeks, blind Bartimaeus, the woman with the issue of blood, the woman at the well, the Samaritan woman, in all these characters, you will notice this, that they had broken through their fear, their pain, their anguish. Their problem was solved, but they had moved into peace. There are times your problem is solved, but are you peaceful? You may be able to pay your rent, pay your loans, you may even be healed. But does it solve the issue of peace in your heart? Does it give you stability? Why? Because you can get reinfected with COVID. You can yes, you paid your electric bill this month and all your bills, but coming month is another bill is going to come. Does it give you peace that you'll be able to pay it again? No. Gives you a little rest. But then again, the stress happens all over again. But you know what gives you peace? You know what? This is what gives you peace. If you get to know the God who is our shepherd and your friend, and to know that in whatever problem, your heart is quiet because there is one who takes care of you. It is not knowing here. It is knowing the person. You can read your Bible all you want. That's only information. But you know where to get to, where you get to know God? In the midst of this mess, walking with Him every day, every moment. He gets you through your moments. He gets you through your day. He gets you to your bed. All right. And you start the day all over again and He's still there. Knowing God is an everyday thing, and knowing that He loves you is where the peace comes from. The Samaritan woman was freed from her shame and her past. Blind Bartimaeus was given his sight. The woman with an issue of blood was healed from their disease, but in the end, they walked away with peace because they did not only experience God's power, they got to know Him. And what they found out was astounding, that He cared and He loved them, so that every day from that moment on, there was peace. We don't get peace by miracles. We get peace by getting to know the miracle maker. Press on. You wanna make sense of the mess? Press on. Beyond COVID, get to know God. And all its difficulties, get to know God. Beyond the problems of the world, get to know God. Find Him in the mess. Don't be satisfied with what God can give. Pursue God. Thirdly, there was something that this man had. He was desperate to see God in the mess. When Moses said, I don't want the land that you will give. I don't want the angel. I don't care for the freedom that you can give. What Moses was saying, when we get to the promised land, what's important to me is that you are there. He was desperate. What? To see God in the midst of their journey, to be with God in the journey, to be with God in everything that they were going to face, to be with God in their destination, to be with God in facing all the troubles of the 40-year journey will take. 2 million people. What I need to see is you, that you're there in all that mess. So Moses said, I want to see your glory. And God said, I will make my goodness pass in front of you. God is not hiding. He wants you. Wait. God wants you to want to see Him. I'll say that again. Sa Tagalog, gusto ng Diyos na gustuhin mo makita siya. And that's what Moses did. I cannot explain. And even my explanations may not be acceptable. The only thing that will ever make things clear to you is not my explanation, not my preaching, not what I am trying to tell you or the stories I say. The only way that you will ever be satisfied in our time is this: to have an honest conversation with God, to want more than the solution, and to want to see Him in this. It may start with anger. Fine. I'm going to talk to God. And I'm going to tell Him my mind. Go! By all means, go. If you're gonna use your time and your energy, go do it. And if anger and frustration starts that journey, start it. So that you can discover, so that you can find your answers. Don't just ask questions and be angry every day. Sometimes the pursuit of God begins with the frustration, begins with anger, starts with confusion. But start it. If you're angry, start that conversation. Start that journey. Why? Because you don't need my answers. Find out for yourself. And God is a knowable God. And if He wants you to see Him in this mess, He will show Himself to you, I assure you. If it is Him that you seek Him you will find. If you are looking for solutions, you'll get solutions. But if you are looking for God, you'll find Him. But I can't take the journey for you. Don't be satisfied with my preaching. Don't be satisfied with my stories. Don't be satisfied with what I'm trying to say. I'm not trying to entertain you here just so you can get your mind off your problems and the world's problems. I'm not doing that. My stories are here to reflect my search, to reflect my disappointment and my satisfaction, to reflect my weakness and God's strength. My stories are here to be able to somehow show you there's another way other than being a victim. So many of us are suffering. What are you going to do about it? Beyond finding a job, beyond trying to earn a living for your family, beyond that, what are you going to do about it? Have an honest conversation with God. Want more than what God can give. Want Him. And want to find Him in that mess. That's what Moses did. He was desperate to see God in this mess. I want to know why. And you'll find it. And there you will find peace. Because God is loving you in this mess. That's all I have to say today. Be well. And just go. Start your journey of finding God in this mess. God bless you, everyone. You have a blessed Sunday and a blessed Monday and a blessed every day. Till we meet again.